Elon Musk. China's economic collapse is worse than you think. The real estate collapse in China has created a catastrophic situation. Elon Musk claims China is on the threshold of a monumental disaster as a result of the country's excessive construction projects, including the frivolous development of apartments and skyscrapers. This has resulted in the creation of too many housing units. Anyone who pays attention to the news lately will already be aware of the growing reports of China's collapsing economy. Countless images of violent protests and dramatic scenes of demonstrating crowds have been circulating as they surround their banks, offices, and real estate development companies after having their accounts blocked and no longer being able to access their money or withdraw their savings. Many are horrified to find out that work on their brand new homes has been put on hold due to the financial catastrophe being experienced within the property industry. Factor in the extended lockdowns and the average Chinese citizen is near the breaking point. Chinese individuals have lately joined together to add gasoline to China's economic fire by refusing to make payments on more than $300 billion in mortgages. Over 300 real estate developers in over 90 locations have had their mortgage payments frozen after what began as a small local petition within local communities. The Chinese government is understandably concerned, and in an effort to slow the growth of the movement, the CCP has been using extreme measures, a decision that has simply fueled the flames of frustration and anger. How could this occur? What happened to transform China's invincible real estate market into this devastating economic disaster? Let's find out. As Musk has reportedly noted, hundreds of thousands of investors were led to expect substantial returns on their money. The development companies expected to bring in an unlimited amount of new backers and continually utilize their funds to pay off the earlier investors. As word of mouth spreads about the high profits of this new scheme, more and more individuals engage in the program, ensuring that each investor in turn receives the huge return on investment, or ROI, they were anticipating. This was essentially a pyramid scheme, and such systems, as you might expect, are likely to fail in the long term. Yet they can be successful in a market where fresh capital is constantly available, providing a continual stream of new income which never runs dry. While being terribly flawed, this is basically how the Chinese real estate development has been working. It's worth noting that a large percentage of the world's Chinese have relocated for work-related reasons to large cities during the last 2 decades. There has been a massive increase in urban real estate development as a direct result of the tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of people who have relocated to metropolitan areas in that period. In turn, people in China place a high value on house ownership as a social good, which resulted in a surge in the demand for residential properties that may be used not only as places to live, but also as means of financial investment. In reality, in China, almost a whopping 70% of family wealth is invested in real estate. People will put down a deposit on Chinese real estate and remain for decades, sometimes even joining forces with other families to do so. Consequently, developers didn't waste any time entering into the residential real estate market to see what was feasible, given the intense demand. This is how the pre-sale housing market emerged, which is distinct from purchasing a brand new, finished home. In China, the situation is even more precarious since homes are sold in a pre-sale round, during which purchasers put down a deposit and begin making mortgage payments before the house is even constructed. That may seem ludicrous, but that's how the industry has been functioning in China. In fact, deposits and pre-sales accounted for 34.5% of the total investment for developers in 2020. It's not difficult to understand how developers might benefit from the combination of an insatiable demand and the liberty to incur enormous debt. It quickly became standard practice to make a down payment and start mortgage payments before construction had even begun. It seems unlikely that the money collected during the pre-sale phase was always utilized to complete the project. It would be shifted up the food chain and used together with huge sums of borrowed money to finish the construction begun the previous year. At this point, some brand new apartment complexes were made available. The first sign-up phase was then finished for any new eager purchasers with a massive mortgage. This additional money could then be used to pay for the last batch of flats to be built. Musk has allegedly made it clear that this system was an absolute calamity. Recent remarks on China has made this view clear.
Yeah, I think we're at an interesting point in history where the United States has been the world's largest economy for as long as anyone can remember. And I think the U.S. became the largest economy, probably 120, 130 years ago. And there's nobody that old really anymore who can remember a time when the United States was not the world's biggest economy. Now we're heading towards a situation where China is going to be probably have an economy 2 to 3 times the size of the United States, and so that's just a different world. I do think there are a lot of people in the government in China who kind of grew up with China being a small economy, and maybe who feel like China was pushed around a lot, but they haven't fully appreciated the fact that China really is going to be the big kid on the block, and so like if you're going to be the big kid on the block, then you can really be pretty chill about things. You don't have to worry about, like, other countries are not really a threat to you if you're by far the biggest kid on the block. So I would say that's kind of an important mindset change. Hopefully that China goes through, is just to think, like, if you're the biggest kid, like, how would you want the biggest kid on the block to behave? And now, if you are going to be the biggest kid on the block, then wouldn't you want to behave like you would have wanted the biggest kid on the block to behave? I think that's pretty important. Overall, I think like Tesla has a good relationship with China, and I don't mean to endorse everything that China does, any more than I would say endorse everything the United States does, or any country. But overall, I think we are headed to an interesting and different world, and I hope that we can remember that we're all human beings, and let's just try to have as positive a relationship as possible, and work towards mutual prosperity of humanity as a whole.
Recently, a Chinese economist remarked that while the economy is doing well and expanding steadily, most properties can't be supplied, but that when the economy is doing poorly, it becomes similar to a massive scam. This means they will not be able to finish building unless they get further funds after the first investment. So long as there is constant new demand and nothing stands in the way of these projects being finished, it looks similar to a Ponzi scheme. Purchasers of homes are defaulting on their mortgages as a result. Less money is available to developers for building unfinished structures with no running water or infrastructure. What will be the potential effects of a chaotic end to China's economy? First, we must discuss 2 very important elements. To begin with, we must consider the restrictions imposed by the Chinese government. It became clear that Chinese real estate investors and developers have become dangerously overextended. The 3 red lines was a relatively new regulation introduced, which meant that Chinese real estate developers could only take on more debt if they could prove that their debts did not exceed 70% of their total assets. Ideally, a company's net debt would be less than 100 times its equity, and its cash on hand would be sufficient to service its short-term debt in full. And although this is all fairly brilliant in theory, in 2021 about half of Chinese property developers were found to have crossed at least one of the red lines. As old debts came due, it was hard for the whole sector to find new money. It was like this with the construction company Evergrande approximately 10 or 11 months ago, and it finally exploded, a situation that is causing huge problems. Even now, many huge residential development projects have already been suspended. As a direct result of these new regulations, the government of China has reportedly warned other developers to be ready to take over unfinished projects if they saw some of those developers going out of business. Since many builders can't seem to raise enough money to finish their projects, progress has slowed dramatically. In addition, the Chinese economy has ground to a halt due to lockdown restrictions. Overall, this resulted in an extended stalling of these real estate developments, a factor that ultimately turned off many would-be purchasers. According to the Japan Times, it all began with an angry letter of just 590 characters sent by buyers of the half-built Dynasty Mansion in Shaanxi Province, who had been paying China Evergrande Group for a long time but still hadn't received the properties they'd paid for. If work doesn't start back up by October 20th, all homeowners who have outstanding mortgage loans will cease making payments. The ultimatum they threatened with quickly spread across various social media channels, including 2 popular social media channels, WeChat and TikTok. This has become a cry to action among the Chinese citizenry within the country's fast-sinking real estate bubble. Within a few days, the letter served as a model for protests all the way from Shanghai to Beijing and Shenzhen to Zhangzhou. Within 4 weeks, more than 320 projects in around 100 cities were experiencing similar protests, with residents cutting and copying it to construct their own boycott manifestos. Marketplaces were thrown into chaos, and officials had to resort to corral banks and developers to calm things down. It's safe to say things escalated pretty rapidly. At present, hundreds of thousands of borrowers are refusing to make payments on nearly $300 billion in mortgages. However, the Chinese government is still worried that this might trigger a chain reaction of economic turmoil, despite the fact that this represents just a tiny fraction of the country's mortgage market defaulting on loans, and a drop in property values have led to widespread distrust of the property development industry. The chill in the real estate market is anticipated to extend to the banking system and ultimately will have ramifications for the entire Chinese economy. The second significant concern is the potential for a catastrophic banking sector crisis if the real estate market freezes up. Developers have already stopped making payments to banks. Now lenders aren't being paid back by suppliers to the construction industry. Moreover, Chinese homeowners are increasingly refusing to pay their mortgages. There have been clear indicators of trouble in the financial industry. 400,000 Chinese consumers had their funds frozen earlier this year, when 5 Chinese banks froze customer deposits. Investor confidence is the single most important factor in the health of China's real estate industry. You might expect to see mortgage boycotts and widespread societal unrest as a result of a drastic drop in new house sales. The heyday of the greatest asset class in the world seems to be past. Thank you very much for watching. Tell us what you think about China's real estate market in the comments section. Make sure you like and subscribe for a chance to become a top analyst in the world's economy and a successful financial investor.